Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a quorum. We can do introductions. You want to start us off, Faith?
I'm Faith Schulstrom, representing Frank Barbieri.
Carmen Campbell.
I'm Joseph Sanchez, the Chief Operating Officer.
Patricia Morales, I'm the Deputy General Counsel.
Is this, oh, it is on. Gordon Longhofer, CTA President.
Leanne Evans, Treasurer.
Heather Frederick, Chief Financial Officer.
Sherry Brown, representing District 4. And anyone from the public comments?
Well, and I just wanted to also mention online, we have Miss Lori
sorry.
Benino and Mr. Ryan Rossi
Great.
to finalize the committee.
Thank you. Any public comments? None? So we have minutes from April 2nd. Does anybody have any comments on it, or could I get a motion to approve the minutes? So moved by Faith. Second. Ms. Campbell, can you second the motion? Oh, sorry, she didn't hear me. Carmen, can you second the motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then I'll turn it over to Heather.
All right, well, today is our final budget committee, and we're going to give an overview of the general fund budget, just some updates from our last meeting. So with the general fund, we didn't make many changes this year, especially with the sunsetting of ESSER. We wanted to take some time to absorb those additional costs from ESSER that were necessary. And then, so we're trying to really minimize the changes, waiting to determine what the final impact of what the vouchers will be on enrollment, as well as charter school enrollment. So we did try to keep it pretty much as status quo as we could within the general fund, so we didn't have a lot of changes. Today is really going to focus on the capital budget, because we haven't really presented anything to the committee on the capital budget. So we do have the the now 12-year capital plan, and it is balanced. And so you're going to hear a lot from Ms. Evans today on the capital budget. All right. So with the general fund, general fund budget is still balanced, and we do have some additional funds left over for a salary and benefit reserve. There is one change from our last meeting. We are adding in a pilot to change how we fund athletics within the district. This came up recently as part of the audit committee. Athletics is funded strictly by parents through fundraising, and it does not come through the operating budget at all. It's all funded through internal accounts at the school sites. There have been some questions raised from some constituents saying that some of our schools are charging a significant amount for fair share. And fair share is the amount that parents are charged in order to participate in whatever athletics program. So it came up in one of our board workshops where one of the board members asked us to look into possibly changing what we do in Palm Beach County, comparing us to other districts in the state. So we went through a whole analysis, working together with the athletics department, and we did find that Palm Beach County is really an outlier in terms of how we operate our athletics. Our schools are, independent, and they're allowed to do pretty much whatever they want. So changing what we're going to do is we're proposing to centralize all of athletics. All of the payments would be made from the district. Each of the schools would have a specific budget set aside, and that would ensure that all sports, including cheerleading as well as band, would receive all the same resources. A lot of the sports might not have as much participation, so they might have older uniforms, or they might have to use uniforms from another sport, so we want to make sure that there's equity. So we would have a standard set of uniforms for all of the athletic programs, standard colors for all of the sports within the schools. and it would all be managed through our athletics department. This is a significant change, and so it's not one that we're recommending that we implement district-wide, that we first need to pilot it, and we're going to start with 4 schools. The reason being is that many of the high schools already have contracts in place, with companies like Under Armour and Nike. So we would have to work through those challenges with the legal department. Some of those contracts we might have to grandfather in, so it might take, time to completely roll out, for example, standard set of uniforms. We'd also have to work on doing an RFP for a district-wide program for, with Under Armour or Nike, so that we could really leverage getting a lower cost. But that's going to take time and not something that we could do and have ready for the start of school. So we really want to make sure that this works. We know that each school does operate a little differently, so we wanted to pick 4 schools that are really representative of all the schools, so we could work through all the potential issues and make sure that we have all the proper procedures and controls in place. And so starting off, the impact for the 4 schools is estimated to be $340,000. The district would be keeping all of the gate fees. We would be setting the fees. We would be keeping all of the gate fees. That would help to offset the cost. We believe that the impact, if we were to implement at all of the high schools, and it would also include middle school sports as well, we believe the impact would be approximately $2 million to the district. So that is a change that we're making in next year's budget. So it's just the impact of the 4 schools at $340,000. The highlights of the budget that we already presented in our last meeting, the base student allocation is increasing 3.38%, or $181. That does include an amount set aside for teacher compensation, because now the teacher compensation is within the base student allocation, and that's the state just saying you need to make sure that you at least pay teachers a certain amount. And so they've set aside approximately $12 million for that we have to spend within the base student allocation for teacher pay. Our per student funding in total is increasing $210, or 2.27%, which is a little bit lower than the statewide average. And that's why, because we had a slight adjustment to our district comparable wage factor, which went down slightly this year. We're able to set aside $38 million for salary and benefits reserve. And I do have some good news, because we did receive the tax values yesterday, and the tax values came in higher than what was projected. So what was projected was 3.5%. They came in at 5.9%. So now we've been able to set aside $42 million for salary and benefits.
Other than the contractual issues, are there issues related to the change in funding, that contractual and the fact?
Yeah, one more. No, one more time.
It'll be right around it there.
Yeah, yep, you got it.
So other than contractual and the fact that it's going to be $20 million, are there?
2 million.
Oh, okay,
Two.
I thought you said 22.
No, 2 million.
Okay, so that makes a difference. Are there issues around the changing of funding for the sports and athletics?
What do you mean? Are there any?
Well, I guess there's some inequities now, and I just wonder if there's some competition among schools, or if there are things that will maintain the inequities, or?
Schools would be still allowed to retain their gate fee, not their gate fees, their concession fees, as well as parking fees. So if they're collecting anything for parking or concession, they would be allowed to keep those. The schools would also still be allowed to fundraise. So what the district would be providing would just be what is needed for that particular sport. We would have a committee that includes athletic directors that would establish a list of standard equipment and uniforms, but we wouldn't be buying the fancy jackets or anything like that. So the schools would have to raise for anything that was the ones that they wanted. And then also for any of the games that would not be the standard set of games that you would play within the season. So yes, there could still potentially be some inequities, but at least every school would be receiving what they need for that particular sport. Because right now, there is inequity in that schools, like I said, that we have some schools that are borrowing uniforms from another sport because they don't have the funds, they don't generate enough funds to purchase them now. So we want to make sure that, every sport is treated in the exact same way and receives what they need to truly participate in that sport.
And will there be coaches from those lesser sports on the committee?
Well, we're working on developing the committee now. So we did meet with a small group of principals first, just to get their feedback as to whether there was interest. They were really excited about the potential. So then we met with all the district high school principals. And for the most part, the principals were very excited about the opportunity for the district to take on this role, because it is difficult for them to manage all of the athletics at their school sites. And so that's why we want to make sure that it is going to be successful, and why we wanted to start with a pilot. And it's voluntary. So we asked for 4 schools. I believe we had 12 that volunteered. And so they're waiting now. They want to know who are the 4 schools that were chosen. So we haven't released it yet, but we do
You're
have.
not going to tell us first?
No, we're not going to, no, we're still going to keep that quiet. But I spoke with the chief academic officer yesterday. She said, they want to know, Heather, when are we going to release it? So they're very excited. They're really excited about this potential change. But I know that there are a lot of people, including the Inspector General, as well as board members, who would like us to move a lot quicker. But we need to make sure we're going to be successful. And that's why I think it's better to start with a pilot.
So when you say 4 representative schools, are they 4 schools, not asking you to tell us, that are in need, or does it matter?
We have a combination. We wanted to make sure we had a Title I school, a non-Title I school, a school that has a powerhouse sports program. So we wanted to get a good representative sample of all the schools.
Thank you.
So that's why we're going to select them, to make sure that we get one of each.
Thank you.
So this was an overview, which I presented at our last meeting, was the FY25 forecast. We had $38 million, even including that change of the $340,000. So it was $37.7 million. I rounded that up to $38 million available for salary and benefits reserve, but that is now $42 million, based on the $56 million has now been increased by $4 million as a result of the higher property values. I presented this slide earlier to one of our earlier budget advisory committee workshops. But it is recently updated by the Census Bureau. So we did move up 1 spot from 47th to 46th in the nation in per pupil spend. That still shows that we are well below the national average. When you add in our referendum, our 1 mil referendum, that does move us up from 46th place to 39th place. It ties us with North Carolina. The exact amount is North Carolina. So we are very fortunate that we have the support of the voters in Palm Beach County that to help to provide to supplement the funds that we receive from the state, so that we can provide additional resources, as well as additional compensation for our teachers to improve recruitment and retentions of good, high-quality teachers. We also provide mental health professionals in every school, and we also supplement our security initiatives as well. The financial condition ratio was also updated recently. So we have the FY23 information. Palm Beach is in the orange. So you can see how we, during the Great Recession, during 2010 to 2012, how we bumped up our fund balance and then how it was slowly spent down. We are continuing on that trajectory through because of the ESSER funds as well. So you can see our our financial condition ratio has increased from 9 to 12%, and we're averaging at about 12% right now. We have to make sure that those are one-time funds, and that's how we've been able to accumulate to increase our fund balance, and we have to make sure to use the one-time funds for one-time needs and not recurring initiatives. If we go and look at Hillsborough County, Hillsborough is in the purple. You can see Hillsborough at one point had the highest fund balance in the state, and they unfortunately started using one-time funds for recurring initiatives. It was actually for teacher compensation because they were a part of a grant program. That grant program ended up going away. They didn't make adjustments to their salary. At the same time, they had declining enrollment, and they weren't making adjustments. And you can see how quickly that funding dropped. So they went down almost to the point of financial emergency. They were really, truly only saved because of the ESSER funds. And you can see they did have a big spike this year, but that spike is primarily, I'm certain, related to those federal ESSER dollars. I also wanted to highlight Broward County, because Broward County has been in the news recently, and especially because they decided to use grant money, so one-time money for teacher compensation as well. You can see Broward stayed pretty low on what their financial condition ratio, which is really their fund balance, a good portion of their fund balance. And you can see that they jumped up to 5% as a high, and that was as a result of ESSER funds, but they've dropped down to 3.6%. So they are at risk for being in financial emergency. If they drop below 3%, if their financial condition ratio drops below 3%, they're at risk for the state coming in and taking them over for being in financial emergency. So you need to be very careful about, we need to be very careful to use these one-time funds for one-time initiatives and not recurring initiatives. And so that's the update on the general fund budget. If there are any questions, I can answer those, and then I will pass it over to Leanne.
I took the mouse.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We've got a lot to go over with the capital plan. We're going to go over it in great detail today, so hang with me. And if you get to the point where you need a break, just speak up and we'll take one. So we're going to start off with just a summary. The capital plan is a requirement from the state. We have to adopt a 5-year capital plan every year. So we always start with the old plan and then make updates annually. That's how it works. So it's required to do a 5-year plan. We extended it to 10 years. We actually did 11 years in 2016 to incorporate the full sales tax referendum, and then have kept it at 10. Once we did the work to get to 10 years, you might as well keep it there and just keep going. It's a great planning tool. There's a lot of estimates when you get out that far as to what we're going to need. The IT folks will frequently tell me they don't know what computers are going to look like in 10 years, but we know we're going to need money for those items. So this year, we're extending it out to 12 years, again, to go out for the full sales tax referendum, the one that will be going to the voters in November. Money will come in starting in 2026, and it will run through midway through 2036. So the capital plan is a planning tool. It's not the first year is the capital budget, but after that is planning, and we revise it every year based on financial conditions, based on conditions of facilities, based on needs and the goals of the board, the strategic plans. So we update it every year. And as soon as we're done with this and we adopt the budget, we'll start the planning process for next year. So it's really a continuous process. But we are balanced. FY25 and the 12-year plan is fully balanced. I do need to incorporate the estimated taxable values that came in. That's an additional $9.5 million in the first year. It's a lesser increase going out in the other years, but we'll be adding that in before we get to the tentative adoption, as well as, final closeouts. There's a lot of changes that happen at the end of each fiscal year. So what's included in the capital plan? High level, it's construction projects, and there's new schools, modernizations, additions, and remodeling. For facilities, we have a couple of buckets there. We have what we call planned maintenance now. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Facility renewals is what is in the current sales tax. That is catching up on deferred maintenance. Facility improvements and site acquisition. And then we have furniture and equipment. There's actually more than these three, but these are three representative projects. Furniture replacement, musical instruments, and the AED devices that are scattered throughout all of our facilities. For technology, we have two big buckets. We have IT, information technology, which is the infrastructure and buying the computers for the schools, and then we have classroom technology. And that's the large flat panels in each classroom, the projectors, the document imaging cameras, all the things the teachers need to teach. So we put them in two different buckets. And we also do the maintenance of all the technology systems and software, such as our financial system, our student information system, and cybersecurity is a big component that we have to pay a lot of attention to these days. We have security projects, transportation, which is school buses, we call it Yellow Fleet, and then the support vehicles are the White Fleet, as well as contracted transportation. So we hire companies to help transport the students. Debt service, we issue debt to build new schools and modernizations and additions, so we have to continue to make those principal and interest payments. We also take care of property and flood insurance out of the capital budget. We have some money in reserves, and the big change this year, really, it was last year, but continuing this year, is the transfers to charter schools. So we'll talk more about that because I'm going to get into the capital plan in just a minute.
So before you leave this chart, how do you differentiate between construction projects and facility projects?
Construction is building, so we're building new schools, building additions, doing major remodeling. The other maintenance projects, and when we get in there, I'm going to show you line by line, so you'll be able to see what the differences are. It's a lot of replacing roofs, replacing air conditioners, fixing leaking pipes. So it's more of the day-to-day maintenance. And then improvements are things like putting in digital marquees or artificial turf or some of the other things that it's not the basic maintenance, but it's really improving the facility to give it a better educational experience for the students.
So it was modernizations that's.
Modernizations is when we're replacing a school. So we recently replaced Verity and Addison Meisner. We went in and either tear the whole school down and rebuild it from the ground up, or we rebuild part of it and then renovate part of it. And when we do that renovation, we take it down to the concrete block, and it looks like a brand-new school. And if we get through, as we're going through facilities, I'm hoping to answer all your questions today, but if I don't do it, Mr. Sanchez is here, and he'll be able to answer any questions I can't. So I may throw it to him at some point today. It's always a test to see how much I know when I do these meetings.
The other question is on technology, and I read that a lot of schools are having trouble with, not necessarily Palm Beach County schools, but with maintaining the computer for every student that we started during COVID.
Yeah, we've got that. We still have that in place. And we're actually upgrading through the proposed referendum. We're updating those so that we touch screens. So we continue every 5 years, those get replaced. And we enhance them and make them better based on the newest technology and what's available. The biggest thing that was surprising is the breakage of the computers. The kids will put a pencil right here and close it, and then the screen is broken. Once that happens and the kids see it, they learn not to do it very quickly. So we hope the break fix will be less moving forward, but we have money in the budget to cover that as well.
And I believe the reason why it is easier for us is because we already had it in our capital plan to go to one-to-one devices before the pandemic. And so all we did was move up the purchase, and we just moved it up. We actually didn't even use any of our ESSER dollars because we already had it built into our capital plan, as well as the continued refresh of those computers. So now we are, with the new sales tax referendum, we are proposing the use of touchscreen laptops for all the students as we refresh them. But we do anticipate the break fix, just to let you know,
gonna
is
be
actually
higher.
going to be a little bit higher because with the touch screens, they cost more money. So we are going to have to build in a little bit more for the break fix for the touch screen. But I believe that's why we're not having the issues, is we already planned to go to one-to-one prior to COVID, whereas a lot of went to one-to-one during COVID, and they used those federal ESSER dollars for the purchase of those devices. So it makes it hard to continue it.
And moving it up, just to add to that, we had it in the plan. It was being done over 2 years. It was going to be over a couple of years, but I had the money in the budget and was planning to carry it forward and use it the next year. So we actually had the money in the bank ready to do that purchase. So we were able to expedite it very easily.
Thank you.
Okay, so these are the construction projects. And these are the projects that are either currently underway or planned in the future. And we have dates for most of them. And I'm not going to go through every one of these. I'm going to highlight the things that have changed. So we've added in Riviera Beach Area High School. And we've added in Western Communities Area Elementary School. That is going to be built on land that was donated by the city of Westlake. So we know where that school is going to be, and we'll be starting construction on both of these in the next couple of years. I've added in normally for construction, and it's a little bit of a misnomer how I've got this set up. Construction is usually the addition remodeling projects, the replacement or modernizations in new schools. We have a section under facilities that we don't call construction. It's all the deferred maintenance projects. They're called facility renewal projects. However, one of those projects is really turned into a modernization, and that's Inlet Grove will be moving into Lincoln. It's still being funded as a facility renewal project that's in the current sales tax, but it is building a new building. So when I went through this with Mr. Sanchez, he was saying, we really do need to show that so that people understand what we're doing there. We did the same thing at Odyssey Middle School for South Tech a few years ago. So we've done it before. But those are a little different, so I wanted to highlight those. The projects that are in our current referendum are in italics, so you can see a couple of those scattered throughout this, and the new projects are in red. Okay, so the capital plan is balanced. The significant updates, and this is, I want to get through this next slide before we flip over to the actual line-by-line review of the capital plan. The biggest changes is adding 2 more years in to make it 12 years. We've added in the FY26 referendum proceeds, and that money comes in, we get half of the funding in 2026, and then if you see all of it in FY27. And then non-construction facilities projects have been broken out into 2 categories. So we used to have construction, and then we had it was called other facility projects. And now we broke that into 2 separate groups. One is planned maintenance, which is aligning with the guidelines from Council of Great City Schools. They recommend that we spend between 2% and 4% of the replacement value of our facilities every year on ongoing maintenance. So we wanted to cluster those together so that we can make sure we've got that alignment and we can monitor to make sure we're in compliance with that recommendation. And a lot of the sales tax money, proposed sales tax, would be going into that bucket. So we wanted to make sure we could track it. And then the other line is the facility improvements that we talked about. And I'll show you examples of those when we go through the capital plan. So it's really planned maintenance of our existing facilities and then improvements and what we're doing to make them better. So you fix a roof versus adding in artificial turf or LED projectors, and there's a lot of them, and I'm using those 2 as examples, but I'll show you the others in a minute. We've added in the 2 new schools, the Riviera Beach High School and the Western Communities Elementary School. And if you recall from prior years, the contingency reserve was very large when we got out to 10 years, and it's even bigger with 12 years. Those dollars really are not a reserve. They needed to be allocated to projects, and we did that this year. We've pushed them into planned maintenance and facility improvements to get that money where it needs to be. Instead of showing a big giant reserve that really wasn't accurate, we've just pushed it up there. And I'll point that out as well. You can see it in the capital plan when we get there. Yeah, we could do the sales tax after. Okay, I think I can move it with this. Okay, so we're going to start off with revenues, and these are the primary funding sources we have to deal with. And the capital plan throughout all 10 pages, it's FY '25, and the '25 includes carryover, the projected carry forward as of the day we ran this report, which I think was May 26th. So any money that has not been spent, it could be encumbered, it could be in a purchase order, but money we expect to roll forward into the future year is included in FY '25. 26, 27, 28, 29, 1 year at a time, and then years 30 through 36, so this is a 7-year grouping, is clustered together, and then we have a total. So that's consistent throughout the document. So CONDS, that stands for Capital Outlay and Debt Service. This is funding from the state of Florida. This is the only state funding we receive for capital. So it's averaging about $6 million a year. They do not give us projections, so that's why it shows up as the exact same number every year. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, sometimes it goes down a little bit, but it's pretty close to this number. And we use that for ongoing maintenance. Local capital improvement, that is the local property taxes. We levy 1.5 mils, and that is the biggest funding source, other than fund balance, in the plan. The fund balance is is the total carry forward, and this includes funding for construction projects that are just getting started. It includes sales tax proceeds for projects that are just getting started. So this money, projected fund balance, is all included in the projects that you'll see as we go through the rest of the document. Impact fees, this is money that comes from the county. The county administers the impact fee program, and it's when there's a new house being built, they have to pay an impact fee, and part of it runs to the school district, part of it goes to, for roads, part of it goes for the sheriff's department, some goes to fire department, but there's a school impact fee that comes to us. And we get estimates from the county. That's one revenue source that I don't know if it's going to continue at this level. At some point, it's going to slow down. But these were numbers and estimates that we got from the county, and we'll be adjusting that every year as we do the capital plan. Interest income, right now, if you ask me today, the interest income we have in FY '24 is a lot higher than this. We expect interest income is going to come down. We keep hearing, when is the Federal Reserve going to lower rates? I don't know. If I did, I would be doing something else most likely, but we honestly don't know what it's going to be. So this is lower than what we have this year, and it's another number that we adjust every year as we move forward. Miscellaneous local revenue, this is actually proceeds from rental of a facility that we have that we rent. And most likely that will go away because I think that building is going to be the site, it's going to be near the New River Beach High School, but I need to verify that. There's a school that we're getting, a church that we get lease revenue from. So this $150,000, it's there for this year and maybe part of next year, and then most likely it's going to go away. I'm just not sure of that, so we've left it in here for now. Certificates of participation, this is our main way of borrowing. We call them COPS. And this is the money coming in for projects that we're planning to build and finance with COPS. So we've not borrowed this money yet. We borrow it once we know exactly how much we'll be spending on each school. Sales tax revenue, this is our current sales tax, and it's going to end in December of 2025. The last money would come in March of 2026. So it is less than what we have in 2025 because it's a half of a year's worth of revenue. And then sales tax revenue, too, is the proposed referendum that will be going to the ballot in November. And when we get into the projects, which starts on the next slide, you'll see ST, which is projects funded out of the current sales tax. XT2 is the proposed sales tax. So I couldn't think of a better way of wording it, so it's just ST and ST2. And right now, we've got this budgeted. It's half a year for the first year and half for the final year because it starts in January, and our fiscal year starts in July. So we have a allocation the first year and the last. And then we're estimating $2 billion, so it's $200 million a year. So that's the total revenues, and it's $11.4 billion over the 12-year window. So it's a big, giant number. Remember, it's spread across a lot of years. And a lot of it, the double normal is in the carry forward. So here we go. These are all the construction projects, and we're starting off with additions and remodelings. I'm not going to go through each one of these because I think they're self-explanatory. I'm going to point out a couple things that might seem odd to you. When you look at, say, the Delray Full Service, you'll see there's 4 lines there that say Delray Full Service. Delray Full Service Phase 2 is a new project that's just getting started with a $20 million budget. The other ones, we broke these projects out. So Delray Full Service, we hire one contractor to do the work, but we have a law in Florida that requires us to stay within a maximum cost per student station. We're not allowed to spend more than that when we build the budgets. There is a waiver in place with the state right now that says there's no penalties for it, but we still have to track it. And cost per student station only applies to new construction. So if you're building a new building or you're building an addition, you have to report on it. If it's a renovation, you don't. So rather than at the end of the day trying to break that out, we have the contractors break it out from the very beginning. We break it out and we report to the board what we expect to spend, and it allows us to make sure that we're monitoring that as we go through the construction process. So you'll see 3 lines. When we awarded, one of them was a modular, we moved some modulars onto the campus, and then we renovated the gymnasium, and we built a new building. So when we look at it from the construction standpoint, they've combined those 3 projects together and manage them as one. But on the finance side, and for all the bills, the purchase orders, we break them out. So you'll see that again with Roosevelt. You'll see it some more with modernizations on the next slide. But other than that, these pretty much are self-explanatory. Anything that's a core renovation or expansion, those are projects where we built a classroom addition 10 or 15 years ago. We didn't make the cafeteria and office and media centers bigger. So the core, it was a challenge for the schools to operate. They were doing 4 and 5 lunches. I mean, it's just difficult to manage the school. So we're going back and expanding the cafeteria, the kitchen, just reworking the core of the school. So you'll see, I think, 8 or 9 of them in here. Some of them are wrapping up. Some of them are still getting started. So we have them going out as far as 2028 for construction. So those are layered through the capital plan. You'll see a couple of things that are for demolition. We're going to tear down the old adult ed site. We've already completed the demo of the old Plamosa site, but I don't think we've paid all the bills yet. So there's still a lot of money there, so it still shows up. But that's the most of the additions and remodeling. And then we move into the modernization and replacement schools. And here again, you see Grove Park has 3 lines. We had a line to fund the portables at the holding campus where they were temporarily located. We had one for renovating the media center and one for building the new buildings. So those 3 get clustered together as far as the construction managers are doing, but we break them out. So this section for modernizations is a lot bigger. If I rolled it to single lines, you'd have 1 line for Addison, 1 for Grove Park, 1 for Melaleuca, 1 for North Tech, 1 for Pine Grove. So we do make this, it's very granular because this is how we manage the budgets. And most of these are underway. We have a couple that have been pushed out a couple of years. The transportation centers, we're still doing a lot of master planning with those and getting those ready to go to construction. And then the new schools, some of these are open. Blue Lake has been open for a couple of years, 2 years now. Dr. Joaquin Garcia and West Point Middle just opened this past August. The others are really designed. This one, the West Acreage area, this is being built with land donated by the developer for Arden. So that one is in the Arden development. It doesn't have a name yet, so we're calling it West Acreage Area Elementary School. These other schools are scheduled further out in the capital plan. So that's really all the construction projects. That makes sense? That's the easy part. So let me start getting into the weeds. So the next one is debt service, and we've broken these out. This lease payment is still showing up here because we have money in the budget right now to make the August debt service. That will be the last equipment lease. We're making the final payment on it, so that will go away after this budget cycle. And then the COPS debt service is broken into 2 sections. All the payments related to debt issued prior to March 2017 and those for debt issued after 2017. And that's really important. And the debt issued prior to 2017, the final payments for those happen in 2033. So that is going to go away, and eventually we'll just have 1 line. But when we calculate the amount of money we pay to charter schools, we can back that money out of the calculation before it happens. So, and when we get to the charter school, which I think is on the next page, you're going to see that number is a lot higher than you've seen in the past because the amount of money that we get to deduct for debt service goes away in this window of time. But that's why they're broken out. And then we have money in here for site acquisition. We've got a new school, and sometime next year, they're going to be buying land for that school. And then reserves, capital contingency is the primary one. We have quite a bit in carry forward, and that's probably the level we need to keep it at. Things happen, over the course of the year. There was a pipe burst and flooded Dreyfus last year in July, and we had to take money out of that to get it repaired before school started. We have 3 million square feet, 30 million square feet of buildings. Things happen. We try to plan the best we can, but there's always surprises, and that's what those reserves are for. And then we do have some money coming in here across the years, and in the last 7 years, that 127 is an average of 18 million a year. So it's just, it's an amount of money, it's a lot of money. For you and I personally, that's huge. But when you're doing an $11 billion capital plan, it's actually a pretty modest amount to have for reserves. We do have the interest reserve and debt service for sales tax. This is the interest earnings on the sales tax to date. And then we also have, and that number is going up significantly. It's going to be 40 million probably by the time we roll into next fiscal year. We earned a lot of money on the sales tax this year, and it's not showing up in the budget yet. But that money is earmarked specifically for the sales tax program. Restricted reserves are dollars and interest earnings related to the debt financing. Those dollars can only be used for projects in each debt financing or to make rebate payments to the IRS because we're earning more interest than we're legally allowed. So a lot of that will probably go away this year too because we'll be recording liabilities and it won't show up as available dollars anymore. So that one will probably go away or shrink significantly. And then the sales tax reserve, this is money that's set aside specifically to deal with the cost escalation of the sales tax projects. All the projects are coming in higher than expected. We knew that was going to happen. We have a plan for how to manage it. We actually moved some sales tax projects into COPS financing to free up dollars to deal with the cost escalation because probably the most important thing about this plan is to make sure we finish every project that's on that referendum list. So that money is there specifically to do that. If there's leftover at the end, then we go to the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, we review what projects would make sense to use that money for, what it would make sense, and then we take it to the board to amend it. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Ask me that in a couple of years, and I'll be able to answer your question. So now we get into, I call these required non-construction payments. And I'm going to start at the bottom because I'm going to spend more time with the things at the top. The property and flood insurance. This is an estimate of what we think it's going to cost, and we'll know what that's going to be annually. The cost of property insurance has been well reported in the news. It's going up significantly. So this is an estimate. We do have a cushion in here if there's a required funding reduction. That's really a reserve that we use to deal with anything that pops up with maintenance. The funding this is transferred over to the general fund. And if there's a surprise that we need to spend more money for contracted transportation, or there's a surprise related to interior painting of schools, this is the relief valve we have to help fund that. And then we have charter schools, and there's 2 lines here. The top one is in the sales tax because we will be sharing the proposed sales tax on a per student basis with the charter schools. So we've got this broken out. It is roughly 10% of the $2 billion we're expecting to get. That could go up or down, and it will be adjusted, and we'll be paying that out throughout the year based on when revenues come in, and it'll be adjusted based on FTEs. And then the transfer for charter schools, this is the portion of the 1.5 mils that we now have to share with charter schools. It started in FY24 at 20% of the recommendation after it's adjusted for those debt service payments we talked about. It goes to 40% in 2025, 60% in 26, 80%, and then 100% in 28. And then once you get to 2030 and 2033, that's when you see a big drop off of the debt service. So a larger amount of money is available to go to charter schools. So between these two lines, we have roughly $950 million budgeted to go to charter schools over the 12-year window. It's a big number.
I don't understand it, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it's required by statute that we have to share with charter schools. So we have a calculation that actually was developed. We had a draft of it, of how it do it, but DOE has provided a calculation of how it works. So we're just calculating what the expected property values will be. And then we deduct from that the amount of debt service for debt issued prior to 2017. And then what's left is divided on a per student basis and shared with charters.
And then when the legislation was passed, they didn't want to require us to fund 100% of it up front, so they're phasing it in. So that's why it started at 20%. 40, yeah, because they're giving us time to build it into our budget, although it's still, it's still a big chunk, and we still had to plan for it last year, the loss of those funds.
There is a possibility in the legislative session that the legislature could provide money for charter schools. They did that in FY '24. And if they do that, that gets reduced. That comes off the top. So if,
For sure.
well, there's no guarantee they're going to build it into the budget every year. So we do not have that included in the budget going forward. We don't know if it's going to be there. If it is, then we have a little extra money that comes back to us for that 1 year. And we usually put that into capital contingency as a reserve, and then we can reallocate that later.
Is the student ratio for charters, is that the 10%? Like, how are you doing the sales tax? I don't remember now. I'm sure I've heard it at one point.
It's
but-
proportional, so it's a
Proportional
proportional
too.
share. And so that's why we're using 10% right now, because it's based on capital FTE. That's what's a little different between how we allocate our operating funds to charter schools versus capital. Operating is just based on unweighted FTE district enrollment as well as charter. For capital, we're using our district, what it's called COFTE, so capital outlay FTE. So we don't take credit for any of those students that are in virtual schools. I don't even want to say homeschool because they don't work through us, but if we have students that are not in a facility, they're not included. Charter schools, though, it's just their regular unweighted FTE, so it's a little bit of a different proportional share, just based on that change. And then we do have to update it every year. And then in addition to that, we'll have a projected at the beginning of the year, but then like what Ms. Evans said, we will adjust it after the actual October FTE is reported, as well as the actual February FTE. And then again, after we receive the final certified FTE in August. So we'll make sure it's the exact proportional share. We will adjust it throughout the year.
And the other thing is we don't know exactly how much sales tax we're going to get in a given year. It could come in higher or come in lower. So it's something that we'll be actively managing throughout every year. Okay, so that's the required non-construction payments, and then we're going to go into the equipment. And there's a lot of buckets here. I think I pointed out 3. I pointed out the AEDs, musical instruments, and furnishings. There's also countywide equipment, money set aside for choice and career ed. AV equipment, this is the Destiny Library System that's managing all the textbooks and the iPads and all the technology at schools. Instructional TV, that's things they need to keep the TV station up and running, updating their cameras. We have one, I'm bouncing around a little bit, but the FTE, the FF&E for TV and film, this is money that the TV station uses also, but they're going in and updating the TV stations at the schools. And I'm constantly meeting with departments and trying to figure out things that the district should be funding but isn't funding. So this is a perfect example. We built the TV stations in the schools when we opened them. And then the TV crew sent me a picture, and it's got the big gigantic monitors that like this instead of the flat screens. I said, okay, we've got to fix that. So we put money in there, and they're updating those TV studios on a regular basis now. So really, this is equipment and then the maintenance of the equipment. So the copy machine maintenance district-wide is here. Subscription license for the Destiny Library System. It's equipment and maintaining the equipment of the district. And facility renewals is the next bucket, and this is part of facilities. This is the money that's set aside in the current sales tax. This should have an ST beside it. I just realized it needs to have that there. But this is money from the sales tax to do, facilities department calls it the FCA projects. They were projects identified in the facility condition assessment. It's dealing with deferred maintenance. This was spread out, going out through 2027, but we've actually expedited, made all the funding available. I swapped money in and out of the sales tax reserve so that this money is available to complete all the projects as facilities are ready to do them. We want them to be able to move as quickly as they can to get the work done. And then we have a section called facility improvements. These are things that are improving the facility. It's not maintaining the existing structure, but making improvements. So ADA compliance, this is adding in ramps and stairs when needed, whatever changes are needed. And sometimes we know what those are in advance, and sometimes we don't. It could be a child that moves from an elementary school into a middle school that has a wheelchair, and we need to add ramps for them. So sometimes we know what it's going to be in advance, and sometimes we don't. So that's what that funding is there for. Athletic facilities and playfields. Emergency repairs, this is carry forward from the current year. I never budget for this going out in the future. If there's an emergency repair needed, whether it's a tornado touchdown or there's a broken pipe, we fund that from capital contingency and put it in this line. Interlocal agreements, these are agreements that come up from time to time with other municipalities, and as they're approved by the board and we need to put money out there for them, we put it in this line. So this is what's out there right now. Again, there's nothing out here in the future because I don't know what they're going to be. There's only a few things like that in the capital plan where we just have no idea what it's going to be, and I'll point those out if we come across them. Key Boxes is a project that maintenance is working on to update. Every school has a box inside the office with keys, and people can check them out. We're changing it to where it's got they scan their badge now, so we know who took the keys and when it gets returned so we can track them. So it's adding some technology into a very longstanding process that we've had in place. Marquees, we have money out here to do digital marquees, starting with the high schools and then adding in the other schools. Media center remodeling, that's a program that started several years ago, and we're trying to go through and update the high school media centers to where they have what they need to have these days. They still have books, but they also have a lot of space for collaboration. They have maker space where they're using 3D printers to print and make things. It's a lot of project-based learning goes on in these media centers now. So we're reconfiguring the furniture within those media centers and upgrading the tech as needed. Minor projects, if there is anything in the capital plan that is I call it a holding account for things that might come up, it's minor projects. Minor projects is where we get a phone call that we need to put a shade structure in, or we need to replace stairs at a school that have broken down. It's everything that doesn't fit into any of these categories, and there's a lot of things that fit into there, and there's a lot of money flowing through that account. So within minor projects, we actually break these down into individual projects that we're tracking, but we roll them up for presentation purposes. So there's a group of people that do minor projects, and I think they have 200 projects on their list right now of things that are pending funding that they need to get going. And Joe, did I get that number right? It's about 200. There's always a lot of things going on there. The needs assessment is money to do facility condition assessments. Council of Great City Schools recommends we do one of those every 5 years to review and assess what work needs to be done. So we have one underway right now with some money in 25 and 26, and then there's money coming out in 28 again to get started on another one.
So I had a question on ADA and maybe that
Okay.
needs assessment.
Okay.
Does-
Yeah, everybody,
is where-
please feel free to interrupt as we go.
So your example was if a student moved to a school and needed a ramp.
Right.
Doesn't every school need to have a ramp for?
They have ramps to get into them. They may not have a ramp to get into an individual classroom. It just depends on what classes they're taking and where they're at.
Okay.
It could also be needing to run, there could be paths, I've run across this a couple of times this year. Kids walk from one building to another and they walk through the grass. Well, there's a child that has a wheelchair that needs to get there. We need to build a new walkway so they can get there. So there's all kinds of accommodations. It's mostly for students, but it's also for staff and the public. If we find there's a place, and as much as the team tries to plan and build those all into the schools, there's things that happen as the schools use them, and as the population in the school changes, we need to make adjustments.
As I said, all of our spaces are ADA compliant. But there's probably, there may be an issue here or there that, that needs to be addressed in the older school for a restroom or something like that. But there's also special situations where there's students who have special accommodations. And, you know, one may be a visual issue, or maybe the lighting issue or something like that. And those students may move from elementary to a middle school to a high school, and those accommodations will have to follow that child with their special accommodations through the school, so.
That
that's-
makes sense. So the schools are compliant, but there may be a special needs student.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions here with facility
And if
improvements?
they weren't, the needs assessment would pick it up.
The needs assessment is there to pick up things like that. But if it's a student needing special needs, we typically find out pretty quickly because the student is having issues and we need to fix them. But we have a department, the Building Code Services Department, that goes out and does inspections on schools every year and are looking for issues. So we're constantly trying to keep up with everything they point out. And that's our comprehensive safety inspection that gets reported to the board once a year. I think it's going to the board at this next board meeting. Okay, so these are the facility improvement section. The next one is plan maintenance. And remember, I said the facility improvements and plan maintenance used to be all clustered together. This is the first year we've broken them out. And I really hope we've broken them out correctly. There may be some changes next year where we realized, okay, one needed to be in the other bucket and we may need to move it around. This is the first time we've had them broken this way. What we've done with plan maintenance is try to capture the things that are identified in that facility condition assessment of things that we need to do to our schools. So the easiest to understand real quickly is air conditioning and roof replacement. Everybody knows what they are because they have to do them at their homes too. Building envelope is really anything on the exterior of the building that seals the building up. It could be caulking and plaster and caulking and painting, anything that seals the outside of the building to protect it from the elements. Facility renewals, these are the same thing as the facility renewals we talked about earlier, but these are not funded with sales tax. So I've got them over here under planned maintenance. Fire and life safety systems, that's fire alarms, it's water sprinklers, it's anything that's life safety related. Generators are needed to make sure we have battery backup, and we're upgrading those right now to include all of the intercom systems and the new security systems. So much of them are running on technology now. The card readers, those card readers to get into classrooms need to run even if the power goes out. And our generators currently aren't set up to do that, nor are they wired to work into the generator. So we're having to update the generators and update the wiring for all of those. Planned maintenance, we have a lump sum here, actually two. One of them is the new sales tax, and one is other local funds. This is going to get the total amount for planned maintenance to be the amount that we need based on the facility condition assessment that came out. So that facility condition assessment is using terminology that is industry standards, like substructure and superstructure and conveying. And that's not the terminology we have in our capital plan right now. So one of the things we're doing is translating the facility condition assessment into the terms that our board and the public would understand. So right now, I've got these as lump sums. When we bring this for tentative adoption at the school board, it's going to be broken out into all these categories. So Mr. Sanchez and his team are going to work to help me break those out and put them in the correct buckets.
And one item that I wanted to highlight on this slide, and I'm going to have Ms. Evans go back to the previous slide, is the reason why we need the new sales tax is so that we were able to catch up on all that deferred maintenance, but now we need to continue to maintain the buildings so that we don't end up in the same situation where we have a backlog of deferred maintenance and buildings that are having issues of a leaking roof, which then causes mold and then is more expensive to fix. We want to make sure that we set aside sufficient funds so that we can properly maintain our over 30 million square feet of buildings properly. You know, that's how students will be able to learn, is if in a safe, clean environment. And so half of the sales tax, $1 billion, is going to go for planned maintenance. And that will be supplemented by the millage dollars that we have. But the millage dollars aren't enough. And so that is why we need the sales tax in order to ensure that we can keep our buildings in top shape going forward.
Yeah, this total, I said it was related to the facility condition assessment. It is, but it's also tied to the Council of Great City Schools recommendation that we should be using between 2% and 4% of the replacement value of our schools. We should be spending that every year on maintenance of our buildings. That's what that equates to.
And the facility condition assessment actually aligned with the recommendations from the Council of Great City Schools. That was a report that the council put out, I believe, in 2015 or 16. Our district participates in the Council of Great City Schools. It's the largest, consists of the largest urban districts across the country. Ms. Andrews is actually the chair of the Council of Great City Schools this year. I recommended that the council update their report on school facilities because it was so useful to be able to report back to the voters to show, to align what we're setting aside is really best practice. We are very fortunate when I go to national conferences and I'm speaking with other peer districts, they are facing the issue of deteriorating facilities. We, thanks to the voters, we're able to not get into that position. We're able to catch up on all that deferred maintenance, and we want to make sure to be able to continue it. So all of this is, you know, the facility condition assessment that came out aligns with the Council of Great City Schools, so it just goes to show that we're doing what is best practice in Palm Beach County. And if you could just go back to the other slide, I just wanted to highlight the two sales tax, ST2, under the school improvement projects and the school enhancement funds. We have $30 million set aside in school enhancement funds, and I want to give Mr. Sanchez credit that we're going to take some of the sales tax funds and we're going to allocate those funds directly to the high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. So $250,000 to each high school, $200,000 to each middle school, and then $150,000 to each elementary school. We came up with a list of items that they're allowed to, some guardrails for the schools of items that they could purchase. And then they're going to go through their SAC committee and they're going to vote on initiatives that they can fund at the school site. So I thought that was a great way to get the community involved in the use of the sales tax funds.
And then the other 220, and I'm sorry I didn't cover these, the 220 is a portion of the sales tax that's going to be used for things like artificial turf and digital marquees and enhancements, equipment and choice, updating the choice academies. The choice academies were built, and I'm going to pick on culinary for a minute because it's got a lot of infrastructure. When you put a choice academy in for culinary, they have to have stoves and ovens and it's a kitchen. It's like a commercial kitchen. And those have been well used for like over 20 years. And those stoves and ovens are really showing their age and need to be updated. So that's part of that. And we've also added other local dollars. There's $200 million of other local property taxes that are going in to beef this up as well. Because we recognize there's a lot of work that we need to do. And again, as Ms. Frederick said, the money we have for local property taxes helps, but it's not enough. We need the extra money from the sales tax to make sure we can continue keeping our schools in a good shape.
And especially considering that we have to give now, you know, it's $1 billion
To charters.
to charter schools. Sorry about that.
Nope, that's okay. Thanks for supplementing. Okay, so the next section, so we got through planned maintenance. We're going to move on to security. And we have money out there this year, and then we have $250 million of the sales tax that will be used probably for a lot of these same projects. We are putting in guardhouses at the high schools. And then we have, security is the one area we don't break it out because it varies so much from school to school. And there's a lot of concern about how much detail we provide on what we're doing at a school. But some of the big things, the bidirectional amplifiers, That's, we basically, I'm going to put it in a non-facility term, and Joe will correct me. We're running a ground line throughout the building that is used to pick up the reception for radios and cell phones. So they're making it so that that reception, he nodded, I think I got it right.
Radios only.
It's radio.
Cell phones are separate, yeah.
But we're adding, I've been told this number includes the number for sales, for the cell
Yeah.
phones. There's a separate device that we need to run in for cell phones, but they're doing both at the same time. So that's going to be a big enhancement. I've heard from teachers that say their cell phones don't work in the schools because we build them as hurricane shelters, and they're solid concrete buildings, and the cell tower, the cell signal doesn't always pass through those walls. So making that improvement to the facilities is going to certainly help just the day-to-day operation of the schools. And it's really important for local law enforcement, fire departments, to make sure their radios will work correctly in the buildings. So that's falling under security. We also have vestibules that we're putting in, so a single area when somebody walks into a school, they're in an area that they can't go any further unless somebody from the school buzzes them in, that they can move forward after they've checked their credentials. And then security window treatments, that work is underway, putting in window screens and different types of things in the schools to block the windows so that people can't see in. So a lot of money for security. And then I'm going to move into technology, and it's broken into two big buckets. One is is education technology, and that's really what's in the classrooms. So the one with the ST, that's the current sales tax, and they're coming to the end of that, and they use that to put in all the big flat panels, audio enhancement, document imaging cameras, updated projectors in the schools, and now they're going in and putting in LCD signage throughout the schools and improving all the technology within the classrooms. And then Epic intercoms, we're updating the old intercoms. We did a pilot with the new schools that were recently built and the modernized schools, and the schools just love this. So instead of the hardwired intercoms that are out there, now they have it, and it's all done through technology. And they can send a note. It used to be they could reach out and talk to one classroom at a time or the whole school. Now they can do it one classroom, one grade, one building, one floor, one wing. They can pick exactly who they want to talk to. It's all programmed, and they can reach out. And then the teachers have a button, and they have a lanyard with a microphone on it, and that sound goes through speakers throughout the room. So every child hears as if the student is right in front of, as if the teacher's right in front of them, but they can also hit the button, and that goes to the intercom to reach the front office in case they need help. So it's hanging on their neck, and it's a lot lighter than it used to be, and it's supposed to, I've heard this is very well accepted by teachers. They love it. They all love being tied in with the new intercom. It's what we've been told. So we're rolling that out really as the intercoms are aging out. And then we start speeding it up and replacing them all. But we've got some schools with fairly new intercom systems, so we don't want to just tear out something that's brand new. So we're doing that over the course of a couple of years, getting those in. So that's classroom technology. And then we get into regular, it's IT, infrastructure, what we need to keep all the technology running. And I'm not going to go through every one of these. I don't think you want to hear every one of them, but we have computer refresh. That is where we replace the computers. So we have that bucket of money going out throughout the capital plan. And we do have a line item here that's technology ST2, and that is the new proposed sales tax that will be coming in. I believe all of that's eventually going to be added into computer refresh. I'm working with IT to verify exactly how it's going to be used, but that's the intent, that it will be used to replace the computers. I think the numbers that I had were before with touchscreen, and now we're adding in the touchscreen with those dollars. But this deals with cybersecurity. It's replacing the servers, the phone system that runs district-wide, the internet routers and switches, the disk storage for all the data, for whether it's our student information system, our financial system, all the servers and all the data that everybody has on record on their computer is running through the networks. The budget system, the back-end infrastructure, which is everything we need behind the scenes, all the software packages that we have are down here, the enterprise-wide software packages. If it's educational technology, educational programs that are done at the schools, those have to be funded through the operating budget. But if it's what we need to provide information to parents and the public, so our SIS, Student Information System, the ERP system, running Microsoft Office on all the computers, having cybersecurity and antivirus software, those all run through this bucket, through this. So that kind of covers technology. And then the last section is transportation, so that's purchasing buses. And we have 3 lines. We have school buses for money that's currently in the regular budget, and then we have money that's out there for the current sales tax and for the new sales tax to do buses. And then we have White Fleet. The support vehicles are White Fleet. The current sales tax could be used for maintenance in school police vehicles, but that's it. The new sales tax that's proposed cannot be used for White Fleet or support vehicles at all. It's just for school buses. And then we have a line for equipment that they need. Right now, they're replacing some of the lifts and some of the big equipment in the transportation centers. And then they have a little bit going out for things they know are coming up. And then contracted transportation, that is when we hire a company to transport some students. We use 2 vendors. One is for ESE and special needs students, and then we have one for just our regular students that for some reason we don't have enough drivers or enough buses, and we use an outside company. We don't use that very often, but we have it there included in the budget because we've got to make sure the kids get to school. So however we do it, but most of that happens with our buses and our drivers. That is everything. That is the 10-page capital plan. Are there any questions? And I know I went through it very quickly. I appreciate all the questions and that helps.
I have so we had $212 per student as the increase from last year. If we added up all of the security projects, would that be a significant percent of that or not?
Well,
Or
that's the,
about
well,
what
it's
it
2 separate
normally is?
budgets, so it's 2
Yeah.
separate budgets. So the
Okay.
$210 that we receive per student is the operating fund, that's,
And none of that comes from capital?
no.
Okay,
And then the way
sorry.
that capital is funded is through the 1.5 mill levy that we have. And the one difference between the operating fund and the capital is that when there is an increase in property values of 5.9%, there's actually going to be an increase in revenue of 5.9%. You know, we're going to have an increase in revenue in the general fund in property values of 5.9%, but we're still only receiving 2.27% increase in per student funding because we have the equalized funding for per student. So that's the difference between operating and capital. And then the capital cannot be used for anything on the operating side, like teacher salaries. You know, it has to be capital related, and the statute is very specific as to how those capital funds can be spent.
I usually explain the capital budget are for things that are going to have a useful life of at least 5 years. So it's got to be long-term. Anything that is there that is temporary, we can't pay for paper towels and toilet paper. We can't pay for salaries. The only salaries we can run through the capital budget are the people that are building the schools or maintaining the schools. We can fund that through capital, but the day-to-day operations of the school has to run through the operating budget.
All right.
Any questions?
Probably.
All right, so we went through the school capital outlay surtax, the half penny, continuing the half penny sales tax. So our board unanimously approved the ballot language back in February. We went to the county for their ministerial approval of the ballot language, and they approved in April. We've already gone through the facility condition assessment, which Ms. Evans talked about, which is consistent with what was recommended by the Council of Great City Schools. So we have that now set aside in the capital plan, projecting that this tax is going to be approved by the voters in November. We are working currently on the performance audit. So statute now requires, this was a change, I believe 2 years ago, that if you have what's considered a new tax, you have to go through a performance audit. OPAGA is the one who initiates the review. We had the team on site, was it last week?
It was last week.
And Miss Evans and her department helped coordinate it. It was a significant amount of workload on Miss Evans' department as well as Mr. Sanchez. They focused heavily on facilities, transportation, as well as school police and technology. All the areas that are going to be funded through the sales tax. They actually spoke with everybody. You know, they spoke with some board members, the superintendent, the governance side, the attorneys, the inspector general, grants, all of the finance. So they did cover, it is a full performance audit, but they really did focus on the categories of where the sales tax is going to be spent.
There was 106 interviews in 3 days.
Yes, we had 4 auditors on site, and it's because it's such a condensed timeline. You normally have much more time for an audit. I know the team is exhausted. We had, some were flying in from Texas, and they just had interviews the whole entire day. So we're working now to try to just send any follow-up information that came out of those interviews, and that has to be completed no later than September 6th. We should have a report a little bit earlier than that, and then we do have to have it posted on our website for 3 years. They're not going to come out and say that they support the tax, that we need the tax, or we don't need the tax. It is just an overview of how we operate and how we're using our funds, and do we have controls in place, and so we are looking forward to the results of that. They were very focused on our strategic plan and department goals, and you know, I'm sure there's always areas that you can improve on. That's what always comes out of an audit, so we are looking forward to the feedback that we receive. But the team was great, and I know that the staff, it was a heavy lift. It definitely was a heavy lift. They asked for a lot of information. And so we're due to go to the general election November 5th. And if it's approved, it's $2 billion a year, $2 billion over the 10-year period. And I think Ms. Evans did a great job walking through everything that's going to fund. And this provides a good overview. So half of it is for that planned maintenance that we talked about. A quarter of it is for security initiatives, as well as those school-based initiatives that we talked about. And then the remaining 25% is for technology, school buses, and then the amount that we have to pass through to charter schools. We do have an oversight committee specific for sales tax, and charter schools are required to follow the ballot language as well. And they are going to also be reporting to the oversight committee, the same way that they do for the independent referendum oversight committee for those the operating millage. And then I wanted to give an update on ESSER. So ESSER is sunsetting September 30th. Our goal is to have it fully funded, at least the district portion, by June 30th. I do anticipate that we are going to have some stragglers on the charter school side. We have been communicating with the charter schools since February. They started with nearly $20 million unspent as of February. They were down, the last time I checked, down to $11 million. So that since we've been communicating with them, they have started to submit reimbursement requests. If the charter schools do not fully spend their ESSER dollars, we are allowed to submit an amendment to the state, and the district can use those funds. We did submit our final amendment for the district 2 months ago, and we received final approval last week. So our final amendment was approved. We are taking some teacher salaries because we did have some items that were encumbered that didn't get spent, that are still outstanding. For example, musical instruments. There was such a backlog with receiving the musical instruments that there are still ones where we have purchase orders that have been outstanding for over a year. I still want to honor all of those purchase orders that we have out at the school sites. So we're shifting other expenses into the grant, and then we will then use those dollars that we're freeing up in the general fund to cover all of those items that are, I don't want to risk that they're not in by September 30th, and I want to have everything finalized by June 30th. So we will see a little,
All encumbered.
Yeah, right, everything it's encumbered, the purchase orders have been out there, and it's been a district initiative, a board initiative, as well as initiative of the superintendent for musical instruments, and there's just been a backlog. It's just been hard to get them. And so we do have some other items like that I want to make sure that we honor what we said that we were going to allow the schools to purchase. But now we're going to end up just shifting the funding that will be coming out of the general fund once those actually come in. So we will have, since the amendment was approved, we'll have it fully funded by June 30th. This is the final, what it's going to look like, other than whatever we might have to shift if the charter schools don't spend their funds. So 39% was spent in the category of unfinished learning. We had 4% in technology. There was a portion of the ESSER funds where the state of Florida dictated how we spend those funds, and so that's the amount we spent on technology. Like I said, we were fortunate. We already had the money set aside for the one-to-one devices, but a lot of other districts across the country used a larger chunk of their ESSER dollars in order to get to those one-to-one initiatives. We had the safe operations of schools. That was everything, the custodial, all that additional work that we were doing in the beginning of COVID. And then the safe operation of schools, this is the disaster pay. So these are all of the bonuses that we were able to give to our staff who had all that additional workload put on them during that time period. So those one-time bonuses were a good use of one-time funds, but we no longer have those one-time funds available to give those bonuses any longer. 4% is for indirect cost. We were allowed to do up to 5% for most of the ESSER initiatives, but there were some that had a restricted rate, so that's why it averages out to 4%. And then we passed through a little less than 10% to charters, which might end up being even a little less if they end up not spending their full funds. And then social, emotional, mental health services, that was a chunk that was also another item that was mandated by the state as to how we spend those funds. So some ways of how activities that we funded with ESSER, we provided tutorial support to 26,000 students. Mental health training provided to 28,000 staff within our district. Educational field trips were provided to over 38,000 students. We provided K-5 classroom library sets to each of our elementary schools. Each of those were $350 per each of those book sets. Musical instruments and supplies were provided to over 103 schools. And then we also purchased, which I don't have the bullet on here, but approximately 400,000 books between textbooks and workbooks. So we were able to utilize these funds to provide supplemental resources to our students and to help close that academic gap. So in looking at FY25 and looking beyond, what is enrollment going to look like in Palm Beach County? We are very fortunate that we are currently not facing declining enrollment. I am part of several national school district associations, and we are one of the few school districts who's not facing declining enrollment. If you look at Broward and Dade, they're, to our south, they're both facing declining enrollment in their district-operated schools, not when you look at their charter or their vouchers, but their district operating schools are declining pretty significantly. I think Broward is looking to have a decrease of, I believe it was 5,000 students. So that is something that potentially could happen in Palm Beach County. So what is enrollment going to look like? We do have initiatives that we continued as part of, that we started under ESSER. That's something that we built into our budget. That was one of the items that we sustained, was our marketing initiative of the kindergarten roundup. Making sure parents are aware of the services that we offer here in Palm Beach County. We're also working on rolling out a full online registration system in the fall. We already have it for kindergarten, and then for students that are new to the district, but by the fall, we're going to be able to roll out online registration for all students. So just making sure to bring us up to, bringing up and updating our technology, as well as working on our customer service and understanding and letting the public know really what services we provide, and how it is far superior to the other options that they have within the county. We are facing an increase in our health claims. Our plan did do very well for many years, but after COVID and during the pandemic, we saw a pretty significant spike in our health claims. That is not, it's not going back to those pre-COVID levels. And so we are facing, we really should have had an increase last year in our health premiums. We were able to negotiate an increase, but it really wasn't sufficient to cover the true increase in costs. So we are facing an increase in our health claims and an increase in premiums in the upcoming year. And then what are the future increases going to be in the Florida retirement system? This is the first in many years. We only saw a minimal increase in our FRS rates. The impact was $500,000, which for our district is not significant. Our increase last year was $18 million. I do anticipate that in the future we are going to see more significant increases in FRS as they continue, as the legislature continues to make changes within that program and make sure that it's fully funded. And within the Capital Projects Fund, continuing, we really do need that sales tax initiative approved by the voters to address those escalating costs and make sure that we can continue to properly maintain our buildings to the best practice standard. And then we're always monitoring the future legislative changes. This year, it was pretty quiet because last year they fundamentally changed public education in the state of Florida. So what else are you going to do the next year? You know, so it was a little bit quiet this year, but what else are they going to come up with? So we're always monitoring to see what potential impacts we're going to have in the future. So our next meeting is, this is for the board, so what are the next steps for the budget? July 17th is when the board approves our advertisements. As part of this legislative session, we are allowed to post our advertisements online. Since the process is so prescriptive and the Department of Revenue has not provided us guidance, I'm most likely going to continue with the process that we had where we advertise in the newspaper. But I'm, waiting to, either way, the advertisements still need to be approved by the board. But it does seem like the Department of Revenue is going to keep those same prescriptive requirements of how big the font needs to be, that, you pretty much have to recreate what the newspaper advertisement would look like. And if we don't do it correct, we will have to re-advertise the budget and have another budget hearing. And I don't know that I'm willing to risk that this first year. So I might just keep us status quo, let everybody else work through the process, and then next year move to posting that online. We have our tentative budget adoption on July 31st. That's where we're going to approve our tentative millage rates as well as the tentative budget. And that is the meeting that we would like to have the report to the board from the advisory committee, if the committee supports the budget we're presenting. And then we have the final budget adoption on September 4th. Where we'll also be approving the capital plan and the district, the tentative district educational facilities plan, which ended up being much later this current year.
That's the state version of the capital plan. They have their own way they want us to do it so that they can compare and everything looks the same. They didn't even open it up until September last year. So we bring our own version of the capital plan, what you've seen today, and then we take that data and we plug it into the state document once it's available, and we bring it back to the board as soon as it's ready. So it's an after the fact, because the statute said we must adopt it before we adopt the operating budget. So we have two versions of the capital plan. We have ours and then the state one that comes later.
And then we have the resolution where the board has to certify the millage to be levied, which pretty much is already set. The millage is set by the state, but we still have to have our board approve it, as well as the final district budget. And so this is an overview of the timeline of when we started back in December of 2023 with the board workshop. So I don't know if there are any additional questions on the budget.
You got a lot in.
No, we knew Ms. Evans would.
Campbell has a
Oh,
question.
you do? Okay, sorry.
I have, you remember we talked about the electronic marquees in the
Yes.
past?
Yes.
So according to the information you have on page 6 of your capital plan, does that mean that this next school year, they're going to be installed at the high schools?
We're installing them over time. They're getting done as we can get them done. And we have to do some negotiation too, because some cities have requirements as to how the marquees can be done. Certain heights, certain colors, certain light, the amount of light that it can go out. So as much as we'd like to go and do them all at once, it's probably getting done over a couple of years. We're already installing some. We've already started. We're just going to continue to do that over the next couple of years. And once you do this and we make them all LED and bright and shiny, they wear out faster. So they don't last as long as the old ones. The old ones were just the old board. You'd see somebody with a long stick changing the letters. That's very manual. Those last forever. Once you start adding the technology to them, they don't last as long. So we'll be doing maintenance on those forever.
I know we're always looking forward rather than later to getting things. And then I have one more question. You have a property on the corner of Military Trail and Okeechobee Boulevard, which is the old adult education
Right.
building.
That's the one we're going to tear down.
What's the plan for, what's it being used for now? Is it a storage area or is it just there?
I'll let Mr. Sanchez answer that. He knows better than me.
Yeah, what's it currently being used for? Yeah, it's currently being used, it's going to be demolished, but what it's currently being used for is to store some portable, some modular buildings as we move them around for different projects. But there's a lot of interest for, internally for that site, either for some kind of commercial CDL training or some other property, some other use, maybe for an ancillary purpose. We still, even though, some people have gone to remote work, we still have a need for offices for people. There's been a lot of interest from outside organizations about affordable housing and trying to put that on that site. But we haven't made any decisions about letting go of our properties because but it's not, we're a little bit concerned that years from now, we may need that property for another school at some point. So we're very hesitant about letting go of any of our property. But right now, we don't have a set defined use for that property.
Yeah. We do have money in the budget to tear the building down, though. And they're bidding that out right now, that work.
All right, thank you.
Just on the digital marquees, Leanne got that pretty accurate. There are municipalities that are just going to say no because they just don't like digital. They don't like the flashing lights. They don't like changing characters. They're going to say no to us, and I don't know which city. I have some ideas of what cities are going to be, but because we've run into that before. But I don't think that we're ever going to be 100% digital because we do have to we have to comply with the requirements. All right.
Thank you.
All right, do you want to talk about the report? Does everybody have a copy of it?
So the next item is as part of the policy for the Budget Advisory Committee, one of the items is that there needs to be an annual report to the board. So I drafted a report from the committee. I did provide a copy for those of you who are in person, and then also it's on the agenda. So wanted to work through the draft, see if there were any potential changes. I tried to incorporate some language from previous years. I highlighted the number of meetings we had, gave an overview of the legislative session, the funding that was received, that both the budgets are balanced, that there is some uncertainty in the future, that we have to make sure with our, I know the committee had pointed out in previous years, we need to be careful to not utilize those one-time funds for recurring initiatives, and as well as making sure to recognize employees. And as we continue to amend the budget and adjust the budget as we're closing out the end of the fiscal year, looking at what part of our fund balance is truly related to recurring initiatives, like we just had with the certification of the property values, anything extra that we come up with, putting that into a salary and benefits reserve. So we already started that with the certification of the property values. So we'll continue to, as I said, finalize and close out the end of the year, really go through and determine what part of the fund balance is recurring, and whatever else we have available, we would put that aside in that salary and benefits reserve. And I would like to have a volunteer to report out to the board at the July 31st meeting. And then I can also work with the chair to finalize the draft of the report too, up until that meeting.
I'm going to be out of town on July 31st, so if somebody could volunteer to go instead, if you'll check your
Heather,
calendars. Is that Lori?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I read through, I don't know that I have any changes at this point on the report. Is there anything you see missing or would?
I haven't read through, so
Okay. Do you want to shoot an email maybe to Heather?
yeah.
If you see
Yeah.
something that's, you'd like to change, and is that good with you?
Yeah, that works.
Uh-huh.
That-
And are you comfortable, if you'll send your comments to Heather, are you comfortable with me and Lori, since you're going to be presenting it, we'll finalize it?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
You need a motion about,
No, this one I just had, I don't have it as a motion. I looked at I thought we did take a vote last year, but we did have it as a discussion item last year, not as a vote in case, and I think the reason why I had as discussion is in case we needed to have an additional meeting to finalize it. So I don't know, would we have to amend the agenda to have the board vote on it? Okay, so we would just need a motion to amend the agenda to include a vote on the report to the board.
so moved.
And can I get a second? Carmen? Yes, thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and then do we have to actually vote on the report? Okay, then one more.
And then, can I get a motion?
I move we approve the report as submitted and with minor changes made by the chair and assistant chair or vice chair.
And second by Carmen, thank you. All those in favor, those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Well, thank you very much to the committee for all of your participation this year. Like I said, this year was, we kept it more simple just because of the sunsetting of those ESSER funds and the uncertainty that we're looking at in enrollment. So we have, hopefully we see an increase in our enrollment this year, and next year we can see a more significant increase in our per student funding to allow us to dig in a little bit more.
My concern related to that is that we are doing a lot to make schools safer, but I also want us to continue to think about how we make learning better and stronger.
And we would agree, and that is part of the direction and focus of the strategic plan, is to make sure that we can regain our A rating and to do what's best for our students academically. All right.
Adjourned? Sorry, I just put a mint in my mouth, too. So, well, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you.